And it comes from a quote from Del Toro himself when he was interviewed by NPR. And he describes the iconic scene where the monster first lurches into the doorway as nothing short of an epiphany. And he says, I saw the resurrection of the flesh, the immaculate conception, ecstasy, stigmata. Everything made sense. Del Toro says, I understood my faith or my dogmas better through Frankenstein than through Sunday Mass. And he was talking about an experience he had when he was 7 years old because he grew up Catholic. And it was just fascinating. And he said from that point on, he kind of made Frankenstein as his own theological paper, his own theological treatise. He understood the world through this novel more so than through the religious text. And that fascinates me, one, just to understand him, but also this idea of truth coming to us through horror, of engaging with spiritual truth through the genre of horror, which at first could cause some people to give pause. Like, how can you find, truth and beauty and goodness through the lens of horror? But I think it's what he's done, and even hearing his backstory of how he engaged with that at such a young age, it just makes it a point that I'd love to chat about. Flannery O'Connor, of course, is someone who did this brilliantly in her writing. But it's just interesting how you can't really have a horror story without a moral universe. You can't, because if you don't have a moral universe, if you don't have a moral construct, then why is this bad? Why is this evil? Why do we even care about this? And so it's almost like horror shows us truth through the reversal of the lens. It's almost like developing a negative. We have to have a moral universe in order for horror to be possible. And I think that we could even say that Frankenstein shows us what happens when humans try to be gods without goodness. And perhaps maybe that lends itself to some of the AI conversation and why Frankenstein is more relevant today. But I don't know. What do you guys think? We've got 10 minutes left. John Mark, we'll pass it to you first.
Yeah, so my first thought, and I had not thought of this until this very moment, like, what is he famous for? He's famous. He's a famous director. And if you lined up all the directors, if you lined up Steven Spielberg and you lined up, whoever, all the famous directors, and Del Toro was in line, and you went through and said, what are they famous for? Give me one word. I'd be like, he's famous for making monsters, right? That's kind of his claim to fame, is his ability to create monsters. And so I think it's really interesting, and you wonder how much of his own story is he trying to tell by the story of a man who makes a monster, because that's what he's been doing his entire life, is making monsters. And so when you read that quote, all of a sudden it kind of made sense to me. That I do wonder how much of this, I would love to hear some of his life, and I wonder how much of his own story has he put into this film.